Her husband was upstairs, asleep after a long dinner with clients. The house was quiet in a way that made every sound louder: the tick of the clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the shuffle of my own breath. And there she was, sitting across from me at the kitchen island, her glass of wine untouched for the last 10 minutes. I'd met her plenty of times before, always polite hellos and careful distance. She was elegant without trying, hair falling in loose waves, a softness around her eyes that only years could give. And yet tonight there was something different. She wasn't just my boss's wife. She was her. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice the way her fingers rested against the stem of the glass, tapping lightly, as if she was weighing something she wouldn't say. "You don't talk much, do you?" she said finally, her voice low, carrying a half-smile that felt like both a tease and an invitation. I cleared my throat. "Guess I don't have much to say." Her eyes stayed on mine, steady, unflinching. She didn't rush to fill the silence, didn't ease the weight of it. Instead, she let it press down, until I had to look away. The air between us thickened, a kind of invisible pull, as if the kitchen itself had shrunk and left just the two of us in the frame. I reached for my glass of water, but my hand brushed hers on the counter. Just a second. Just skin against skin. But the shock of warmth sent a current through me, sharp enough that I almost pulled back too quickly. She didn't move, though. She let it happen, her fingers lingering a fraction longer than they needed to. I could feel my pulse hammering in my wrist, but my voice betrayed me by sounding too casual. "Sorry. Don't be," she said. And then, leaning slightly closer, her perfume caught me, something faint, floral, and warm. It was maddening. The clock ticked again, louder somehow. I noticed her breathing change, shallow, deliberate, as though she was holding something back. She tilted her head, studying me in a way that made my chest tighten. "You know," she said slowly, "there's a line here. And most people pretend they don't see it." Her words landed heavier than they should have. My mouth went dry, but I couldn't look away. "And you?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Her smile deepened, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I dare you to cross it." The words sat between us, sharp and soft all at once. My hand tightened around the glass I hadn't lifted. I could see the rise and fall of her chest, the faint tension in her jaw, the slightest tremor in her hand where it rested near mine. She looked calm, but her body told the truth. She was as caught in this moment as I was. I opened my mouth, not even sure what I was about to say, when the creak of footsteps echoed from the staircase. We both froze. Her eyes flicked toward the sound, then back to me. For a second, either of us breathed. The steps paused halfway down. And then, slowly, her lips parted, without a word, just the smallest curve of something dangerous. The footsteps faded, then silence again. Whoever it was, probably her husband, had turned back upstairs. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, but she didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, steady, deliberate, as though the pause hadn't broken anything. In fact, it felt sharper now, like the danger had doubled because we both realized what almost happened. She leaned back slightly in her chair, but her hand still rested near mine. "Close call," she murmured. I nodded, though my throat was dry. "Yeah." The room returned to its hum, the refrigerator, the distant ticking clock. But inside me, it wasn't quiet at all. I shouldn't have been here, sitting with her after midnight, letting my thoughts drift where they weren't supposed to. She was older, married, untouchable. I'd had girlfriends my age before, short-lived things that burned quick and fizzled faster, but nothing like this. Nothing that left me restless, shifting under the weight of someone else's gaze. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said suddenly, catching me off guard. Her voice had softened, carrying something almost wistful. I tilted my head. "That a good thing?" Her lips curved faintly. "Depends who you ask. I was impatient. Always chasing something I couldn't name. Made mistakes. Cost me things I can't get back." She didn't look at me when she said it. Instead, she stared at the untouched wine in front of her, like it held pieces of the story she wouldn't finish telling. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I didn't. Maybe because I was afraid she'd actually answer. The silence stretched, and I shifted, trying to find words that didn't sound stupid. I don't think you seem like someone who regrets much. That made her laugh quietly, a low, almost tired sound. You'd be surprised. Her hand moved then, brushing against my arm as if by accident. But it wasn't. I felt the heat of her palm linger just a moment too long on my shoulder before she withdrew. I knew I should pretend not to notice, let it slide into the blur of casual contact. But the truth was, my skin burned where she touched me, and I knew she could tell. I forced myself to look away, down at the glass in my hand. People would talk, you know, I muttered, not even sure why I said it. Maybe because the thought had been gnawing at me all night. People always talk, she replied, her tone calm, almost dismissive. But then, softer, she added, that doesn't make them wrong. The weight of her honesty hit harder than I expected. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't naive about the line she'd drawn between us. She knew exactly what it meant if I ever crossed it. Still, her nearness pulled at me. When she leaned forward again, her hair fell slightly toward me, brushing her cheek against her own shoulder. I caught the faintest warmth of her breath as she spoke, close enough that it grazed my skin. You're different, she said, and though the words were quiet, they landed like a strike. My chest tightened. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I couldn't. Instead, my hand shifted on the counter, inching closer to hers without quite touching. It was reckless, but I didn't stop. She noticed. Of course she did. Her fingers twitched, just once, before she deliberately folded them in her lap, pulling back as if reminding herself of the very line she dared me to cross. But then, when I thought she'd closed the door, her eyes found mine again. And in that gaze was something she couldn't disguise, the same restless pull I felt. We stayed like that, suspended in silence, until the sound of the wind pressed against the kitchen window, making the glass rattle faintly. It was enough to remind us of the world outside, enough to make her rise slowly from her chair. For a second, I thought she was leaving. But she didn't. She walked around the island instead, her steps unhurried, and stopped right beside me. Her hand brushed my shoulder again, lighter this time, but deliberate. She leaned in, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I felt the heat of her presence. Don't stay up too late, she whispered, her breath grazing my ear. And just like that, she slipped past me, her perfume trailing in her wake, leaving the kitchen emptier than before. But my shoulder still burned where her hand had been. The next evening, I told myself I wouldn't linger. I'd drop off the files my boss needed, make a polite excuse, and leave. Simple. But nothing about her ever stayed simple. She opened the door before I could even knock twice. Hair loosely tied back, a cardigan slipping from one shoulder, she looked more unguarded than I'd ever seen her. You're early, she said, though she didn't sound disappointed. I held up the folder. Thought he needed these tonight. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. He's still out. Dinner ran late. The house was dim, lit only by a lamp in the living room. I hesitated, but she stepped aside, the faint brush of her arm against mine as I passed. Too close. Always too close. We ended up in the kitchen again, like gravity dragged us there. She set down a mug of tea she'd been holding, steam rising between us. You always look like you're about to run, she said suddenly, half smiling. I swallowed. Maybe I should. Maybe, she agreed, but the word didn't sound convincing. A beat of silence. My pulse in my ears. Her eyes stayed on me longer than they should have, searching, waiting. I shifted, unsure what to do with my hands, and she noticed. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but before she could, the sharp buzz of her phone shattered the moment. We both startled. She glanced down at the counter where it vibrated, the screen lighting up with her husband's name. Neither of us moved for a second. Then, with a controlled breath, she picked it up. Yes? she answered, her tone calm, practiced. Still at home. Everything's fine. I stared at the tile floor, trying not to listen, though every clipped word dug into me. Fine. Home. Nothing out of place. When she hung up, the quiet returned heavier than before. She set the phone down gently, but her hand lingered on it a moment, knuckles pale. Her voice was softer now. Do you ever think about what people would say? If they saw us like this? I looked up. All the time. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I knew she heard the truth in my voice. The guilt sat there between us, heavy and undeniable, but so did something else. Something neither of us could name without shattering it. She moved closer, almost unconsciously. The counter between us wasn't much, but she leaned across it, her hair slipping forward. I caught the warmth of her breath again, the faint trace of her perfume. Don't, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant don't stop or don't start. Her fingers grazed the edge of the counter, brushing mine, just enough to set my nerves on fire. We were so close I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the slight tremor in her lip as she tried to hold steady. It would have been nothing to close the gap. Half a step. A tilt of my head. And yet, the weight of what it meant pressed harder than gravity. The silence stretched, unbearable, until I thought it would break me. And then, footsteps again. This time, real and near. The front door clicking open. She pulled back sharply, retreating to the other side of the counter just as her husband's voice called from the hall. Home, he said, setting down keys. You still up? Her face didn't change, but her hand was still on the counter, inches from mine. Our eyes met in that split second, panic and longing tangled together. And though we moved apart, the distance didn't matter. Because the space between us had never felt smaller. I told myself I wouldn't stay late again. But it was a lie I didn't even try to believe. The house was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that makes you notice your own heartbeat. He was gone, another business trip, she said when I asked. She didn't explain why she'd invited me in, only that she had a favor to ask. But the truth was, no favor needed words. We both knew why I was here. We ended up in the living room this time, the lamp casting soft light against the walls. She curled up on the couch, one leg tucked under her, the other brushing the carpet. I sat on the edge of the opposite chair, but it felt absurd, like I was trying to prove I could keep my distance when every part of me leaned toward her. Her eyes found me, unwavering. You've been avoiding me. I opened my mouth, closed it. Maybe I should. She gave a half smile, but it faltered. That's not what I asked? The words tightened something in me. I stood restless, pacing a few steps before stopping near the window. You know why, I said finally, my voice low. Silence. Then, her breath, a little heavier. Do I? I turned. She was watching me, chin tilted just slightly, like she was daring me again. My chest ached with the weight of it. I crossed the room before I could stop myself. She didn't flinch. When I stopped in front of her, close enough to catch the warmth radiating from her body, her lips parted but no words came out. You think I don't notice? I asked, my voice quieter now. The way you look at me. The way you stay too close. You can't keep doing that. Her hand tightened against the couch cushion, knuckles white. And if I can't help it? My breath caught. Her honesty hung in the air, raw, unpolished. I sank onto the couch beside her. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that the air between us felt electric. Then I don't know how long I can pretend, I admitted. Her eyes softened, though her posture was rigid, as if her whole body was fighting itself. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she lifted her hand. Her fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face, then hovered, trembling, before tucking it behind her ear. But I saw it, the urge to reach further. And I couldn't hold back. My hand rose, brushing against hers as I smoothed the same lock of hair. My knuckles grazed her cheek. Soft. Too soft. Her eyes fluttered shut for half a second before she caught herself. When she opened them again, the restraint was gone. "You're too young," she whispered, but the words didn't carry conviction. "You don't believe that?" I murmured, leaning closer. My shoulder brushed hers, my breath close enough to stir the fine hairs near her temple. Her body shifted toward me, unintentional but undeniable. The heat of her pressed faintly against my arm, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world had disappeared. I could smell her, warmth, faint perfume, something that made my head swim. My hand hovered, then rested lightly on her knee. The touch was barely there, but it broke something between us. She didn't move away. She leaned in further, until her lips were almost against my ear. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered. "Then show me," I said, voice rougher than I meant. Her breath caught. She turned, and suddenly her face was inches from mine. The faintest brush of her nose against my cheek. I tilted my head. She leaned closer. And just as the space between us was about to vanish, a sharp knock at the front door echoed through the house. We froze. Her eyes widened, panic flashing, but her body stayed pressed to mine, caught in the gravity either of us could escape. The knock came again, harder this time. She didn't move. Neither did I. We were still breathing each other's air when she whispered, voice trembling, "If you cross that line now, there's no going back." The knock at the door didn't stop. It rattled the quiet like a warning, each strike sharper than the last. She pulled back, finally, but only by inches. Her breath was still shallow, chest rising and falling as though she'd run a mile. I could see the indecision in her eyes, fight, flight, or something in between. "I should," she whispered, then broke off. Another knock. Louder. She stood quickly, brushing past me. The sweep of her sleeve grazed my arm, and even that small touch sent heat straight through me. I stayed frozen as she crossed the living room, her bare feet silent against the rug. When she opened the door, I saw who it was from the shadow on the porch, her friend, Marianne, the one who always showed up unannounced, who gossiped too freely. "Sorry it's late," Marianne said brightly, stepping in before she was fully invited. Her voice carried too easily through the quiet house. Oh. She paused, her eyes landing on me instantly. Her smile faltered, just a fraction. "Didn't realize you had company." My stomach dropped. She glanced between us, eyes sharp in a way that made the air feel dangerous. My boss's wife, she kept her composure, but I saw it, the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers curled tightly around the doorknob. "He was just dropping something off," she said smoothly. "Work papers." Marianne's eyebrows lifted, almost mocking. "At this hour?" I stood, my throat tight. "Your husband asked me to." I started, but the excuse fell flat. Even I didn't believe it. The silence that followed was too long. Marianne didn't press, not outright. But she stayed longer than necessary, asking small questions, glancing between us, her smile carrying an edge. By the time she left, the house felt exposed, as though the walls themselves had been listening. The door clicked shut. Neither of us moved. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like thunder in the stillness. Finally, she turned. Her shoulders were stiff, her eyes searching me with something like anger, but not at me. At herself. At what we'd let happen. "She suspects," she said quietly, almost to herself. I swallowed hard. "We didn't, it doesn't matter," she cut in, her voice sharper now. "It doesn't matter what did or didn't happen. People see what they want to see. And she broke off, pressing a hand to her temple. I stood there, useless, wanting to close the distance but afraid to make it worse. My hands clenched at my sides, then loosened. "Then tell me," I said finally. "What do you want me to do?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, wide, raw. "I want," she trailed off, her voice catching. The unfinished word hung between us. She didn't finish it because finishing it meant admitting the truth. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. She didn't back away. My hand brushed her arm, light, uncertain. She trembled under the contact, just slightly, as though her whole body betrayed what her mouth couldn't say. "You want me?" I whispered. Her breath hitched. She didn't deny it. For a long moment she stared at me, her lips parted, her pulse visible at her throat. Then she shook her head faintly, as though trying to break free from her own body. She stepped past me, brushing my shoulder too closely, her scent trailing behind. But when she reached the hallway, she stopped. Her hand pressed flat against the wall, her back to me, her breathing unsteady. "Marianne will talk," she said, voice low, tight. "She always does. If she tells him." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The weight of it crushed the space between us. And yet, even with the risk swelling higher, either of us could step fully away. I crossed to her slowly. She didn't turn, but when I stopped behind her, the distance was nothing. My hand hovered, then rested gently at her hip. Her body stiffened, then eased, leaning back just slightly into my touch. She closed her eyes. "This is madness." "Then stop me," I whispered, my mouth close enough to brush the curve of her ear. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Just trembled, caught between fear and desire, between ruin and surrender. And in that silence, the choice became inevitable. The silence stretched so long I thought it might crush us. Her back was still to me, her palm pressed against the wall like it was the only thing holding her upright. My hand lingered at her hip, the weight of it both anchoring and dangerous. She whispered, barely audible. "If we do this, there's no going back." "I know," I murmured, close enough that my breath touched her neck. Her shoulders rose with a shaky inhale. She turned then, slowly, as though each movement carried the weight of 1,000 doubts. When her eyes met mine, there was no mask left, only the raw, trembling truth she'd been hiding. For a moment neither of us moved. We stood inches apart, the air thick, the rest of the house falling away. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the faint brush of her cardigan sleeve against my arm, the quick, uneven rhythm of her breath. "You're too young," she said again, but the words cracked this time, weak and breaking. "Then tell me to leave," I whispered. "Say it, and I'll walk out right now." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, her hand lifted, hesitant, trembling, and rested lightly against my chest. My heart pounded under her palm, too loud, too fast. "That's not fair," she breathed. "Neither is this," I said, my hand rising to cup her cheek, brushing back a strand of hair. My thumb lingered at her temple, feeling the warmth of her skin, the faint tremor beneath it. Her eyes fluttered shut for just a second, her body leaning into my touch before she caught herself. "We can't," she whispered. But she didn't move away. The closeness was unbearable. Every inch of space between us was alive, sparking. My forehead nearly touched hers, my voice dropping low. "Then why are you still here?" Her breath caught. And then, finally, she broke. Her hand slid higher, around my neck, pulling me the fraction closer we'd been fighting against for weeks. Our foreheads touched, the smallest, most fragile point of contact, but it was enough to undo us both. I closed my eyes. The world narrowed to her, her warmth, her scent, the quiver in her breath. When her lips brushed mine, it wasn't a kiss yet, just the ghost of one, light, trembling, as if she was afraid of what it would unleash. But it was enough. Enough to tell me the line was already crossed. She pulled back just slightly, her eyes searching mine, desperate and afraid all at once. "What are we doing?" she asked, her voice breaking. "The only thing we can," I whispered. And then we kissed. Not polished, not perfect, messy, aching, human. The kind of kiss that carried every unsaid word, every stolen glance, every moment of restraint finally shattered. Her hands gripped my shoulders, pulling me closer as though she couldn't hold herself back. My arms circled her, one hand pressing against the small of her back, the other still cupping her face, grounding us in something that felt both wrong and inevitable. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, her forehead rested against mine. Neither of us spoke at first, too undone by what we'd done. At last, she whispered, "There's no taking this back." I nodded, my voice rough. I don't want to. And in that moment, with the world spinning quietly around us, the truth settled in. Whatever this was, madness, desire, regret, it was ours. And we both finally understood. The kiss ended, but the silence that followed felt louder than anything before it. Her forehead rested against mine, her breath unsteady, and for the first time since all this began, there was no pretending left. No excuses. Her hands slipped slowly from my shoulders, sliding down my arms until her fingers found mine. She laced them together, tentative at first, as if testing the reality of it. But once they were there, she didn't let go. I've spent half my life telling myself what I can't have, she whispered. What I shouldn't want. Her thumb brushed against my knuckles, soft, lingering. And then you walk in, and suddenly. She stopped herself, shaking her head, a quiet laugh breaking through. Not amusement, something closer to disbelief. I squeezed her hand, grounding her. I don't care about the rules. Not the ones people whisper about, not the ones that say we shouldn't even be in this room together. I broke off, because the truth felt too heavy to say outright. She studied me in that soft, searching way she always did, as if peeling back the layers of my words to find what I couldn't say. Her eyes shimmered with something fragile, almost regret, almost relief. You're too young, she said again, but this time the words sounded different. Not a protest. A confession. Maybe, I admitted. But I've never been more sure of anything. Her face softened, the fight slipping from her shoulders. She leaned in, pressing her lips to my forehead, a kiss both tender and unsteady. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of it sink deeper than any words. When she pulled back, she stayed close. Our hands still tangled, her thumbs still tracing slow circles against my skin. We didn't rush to fill the silence. We didn't need to. For the first time, there was no running, no hesitation. Just us, sitting on that couch, too close to ever go back to who we'd been before. I don't know where this goes, she admitted quietly, her head tilting until it rested lightly against my shoulder. I turned my face into her hair, breathing her in. Then let's just be here. Right now. She exhaled, long and shaky, like she'd been holding that breath for weeks. Her body eased against mine, her warmth fitting into the curve of me as though it had always belonged there. My arms slid around her, pulling her closer, and she let herself sink into it. No more games. No more distance. Just the quiet truth of two people who had finally stopped pretending. The clock ticked in the background. The house held its breath. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an intruder in this story. I felt like I belonged. Her hand tightened in mine, not desperate, not afraid, just certain. A small, steady claim in the dark. And I knew then, whatever came after, we'd already chosen. Together.